He poured boiling water on me when I was 7 months pregnant. Not by accident, not in a moment of carelessness. He did it deliberately, coldly, looking straight into my eyes while I begged him to stop. He burned my skin, left scars on my body, tried to destroy my soul, all just to please his mistress. He thought that would be my ending, that I would disappear in my pain and shame. But what I did next, what I planned in the weeks that followed, didn't just destroy his life. It completely devastated everything he had built, stripped him of his power, money, reputation, and left him with nothing but regret, and he never saw it coming. Hello everyone. Welcome to our story. Before we begin, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Also, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Houston, London, or maybe Jamaica or Canada? We want to know. 3 years ago, when I was 25, I worked as a marketing coordinator at a tech startup in downtown Chicago. I was ambitious, independent, and had my whole life mapped out. I would build my career, travel the world, and maybe, just maybe, find love when the time was right. I wasn't looking for a man to complete me. I was already complete. Then I met Kelvin Richards at my cousin Monica's wedding reception, and Lord, that man knew how to make an impression. Kelvin walked into the ballroom like he owned it. 6'2", wearing a custom-tailored navy suit that probably cost $3,000, diamond cufflinks glinting every time he moved. He had this particular confidence, a presence that made people turn around. He was talking business with the groomsmen, laughing, his deep laugh seeming to fill the entire room. And when he smiled, it was like the sun had just come out. My cousin Monica grabbed my arm, squeezing tight. "Do you see that fine man over there? That's Kelvin Richards. He owns the real estate development company that's buying up properties all over the South Side. Word is he's worth millions." "Millions, Tasha, and he's single." I rolled my eyes. "Good for him. I don't care." "Girl, you should care. Men like that don't stay single for long." But I wasn't thinking about Kelvin Richards. I was thinking about the promotion I was trying to get at work, about the presentation due Monday, about my student loans and savings account, and all the practical things that actually mattered in life. I didn't have time for some rich man with a pretty smile. But Kelvin had other plans. He found me at the bar 20 minutes later, appearing beside me so smoothly, it was as if he'd been there all along. "You must be Monica's cousin," he said, his voice smooth as honey. "She told me you'd be here. Said you're the smartest woman in the family." I glanced at him, trying not to notice how good he smelled like expensive cologne and success. "She said that?" "She did. And I can already tell she wasn't lying." He extended his hand. "Kelvin Richards, Tasha Williams." I shook his hand, and his grip was firm, confident, warm. "So Tasha Williams, what do you do when you're not being the most beautiful woman at weddings?" I almost laughed. The pickup line was too smooth, too slick, but there was something in the way he said it, like he actually meant it, that made my heart. I felt my heartbeat skip just a little. "I work in marketing, tech industry. Nothing as impressive as buying up half the city, I'm sure." Kelvin's smile widened. "Smart and humble. I like that. Most women I meet, they hear about my business and suddenly they're my best friend. But you don't seem impressed at all. Should I be?" "No," he said, and his eyes got serious for just a moment. "Actually, that's exactly why I want to know more about you. You see past the surface. That's rare. That's valuable." And that's how it started. We talked for 2 hours straight that night. He asked me about my work, my dreams, my goals. He listened when I talked, really listened, nodding, and asking follow-up questions like he genuinely cared. He quoted Maya Angelou and Langston Hughes, talked about building generational wealth for Black families, about creating opportunities in neighborhoods that banks had forgotten. He painted this picture of a future where we could build something together, something meaningful, something that would last. By the end of the night, I had given him my number, and I went home thinking maybe, just maybe, I'd met someone special. The courtship was like something out of a movie. Kelvin took me to the best restaurants. He sent flowers to my office with little notes that made my coworkers jealous. He showed up at my apartment on random Tuesday nights with takeout from my favorite Thai place just because he was thinking about me. He met my friends and charmed every single one of them. He was attentive, romantic, and he made me feel like the most important person in the world. 6 months after we met, he proposed. He rented out the entire top floor of the John Hancock building, filled it with roses and candles, and got down on one knee with a 2-carat diamond ring that caught the city lights like a tiny constellation. "Tasha Williams," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are everything I've been looking for my entire life. You're intelligent, you're beautiful, you're strong, and you see me for who I really am, not just what I have. I want to build a life with you. I want to build an empire with you. Will you marry me?" I said yes. Of course, I said yes. How could I not? But there was one person who wasn't celebrating. My mother, Sandra Williams. The engagement party was at Kelvin's house, a massive property in Kenwood with floor-to-ceiling windows, marble countertops, and a backyard that looked like something from a magazine. Everyone was drinking champagne and congratulating us. But my mother pulled me aside into one of the guest bedrooms upstairs, away from all the noise and laughter. "Baby," she said, her voice low and urgent, her hands gripping my arms tight enough to hurt. "I need you to listen to me. Really, listen." "Mama, what's wrong? This is supposed to be a happy day." Something about that man doesn't sit right with my spirit. My mother's eyes were searching my face, desperate, pleading. "He's too smooth, baby, too perfect. Everything about him is too polished, too rehearsed. Men like that, they're always hiding something." I pulled away, frustration building in my chest. "Mama, you're being paranoid. Kelvin loves me. He treats me better than any man I've ever dated. He's successful, he's ambitious, he wants to build a future with me. What more do you want?" "I want you to be careful," my mother's voice cracked. "I want you to protect your heart, because I've seen men like Kelvin before. And baby, they always show you who they really are after they've got you locked down. After you've said, 'I do,' and signed those papers, and there's no easy way out. That's not fair, Mama. You don't even know him. I know men, Tasha, and I know when something's off. Please just wait. Give it more time. If he really loves you, he'll still be here in a year, 2 years. There's no rush." But I wasn't listening. I was in love. I was happy. And my mother's warning sounded like the fears of an older generation that didn't understand modern relationships, that couldn't see that some men really were good, really did mean what they said. "I'm marrying him, Mama," I said firmly. "And I need you to support me. I need you to be happy for me." My mother's face fell. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in that moment. "Okay, baby, okay, I'll support you. But promise me something. Promise me that if things ever get bad, if he ever shows you that side I'm worried about, you'll leave. You'll come home. You won't stay and try to fix a man who doesn't want to be fixed. It won't come to that. Promise me anyway." I sighed. "I promise, Mama, but you're worrying about nothing." We got married 4 months later, in a beautiful ceremony at the Chicago Botanic Garden, 200 guests, a reception that cost $80,000, and a honeymoon in Bora Bora. Everything was perfect. Everything was beautiful. And for the first 6 months of marriage, it really was. Kelvin was still attentive, still romantic. We had date nights every Friday. He brought me coffee in bed on Sunday mornings. We talked about starting a family, about the business we'd build together, about growing old in that big, beautiful house. I quit my job at the tech company because Kelvin said he wanted me to focus on us, on building our home, on preparing for the family we'd have. He said he made enough money for both of us that I didn't need to work unless I wanted to. It made sense at the time. Felt like love. But then slowly, things started to change. It started small. Kelvin began coming home later from work. He'd say he had meetings, client dinners, property showings that ran long. I would wait up for him with dinner ready. But by the time he got home at 10, 11, sometimes midnight, the food would be cold, and he'd say he'd already eaten. Then he started being distant. When I tried to talk to him about his day, he'd give one-word answers. When I suggested we go out, he'd say he was too tired. When I reached for him in bed, he'd turn away, saying he had an early morning. And then the criticism started. "Why is the house such a mess?" he'd say when he came home, even though I had spent all day cleaning. "What do you even do all day? The dinner's cold. Can't you keep track of time? You're wearing that to meet my business partners? Tasha, come on. I need you to look the part." Every comment was small, almost reasonable on its own. But they piled up day after day, week after week, until I started questioning myself, started wondering if maybe I really wasn't doing enough, if maybe I really was failing as a wife. Monica noticed during our monthly brunch. This was 8 months into the marriage, and I had shown up looking tired, distracted, not quite myself. "Girl, what's going on with you?" Monica asked, setting down her mimosa and leaning forward. "You look exhausted. Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," I said automatically, the lie coming easily now. "Just tired. Kelvin's been busy with work and I've been trying to keep up with the house and everything." "Tasha, you live in a huge house. Has he hired help? A housekeeper or something?" "He says he doesn't want strangers in our home. He wants me to take care of it." Monica's eyebrows went up. "The whole house? That's like 5,000 square feet. That's not reasonable." "It's fine. I don't mind." "You don't mind, or you've been told you shouldn't mind?" Monica's voice was gentle but firm. "Because I remember when you and Kelvin first got together, you were so excited about starting your own business, about building something for yourself. What happened to that?" I looked down at my plate, pushing my eggs Benedict around with my fork. "Kelvin thinks it's better if I focus on home right now. We're trying to start a family, and he says once we have kids, I'll be too busy anyway." "And what do you think?" The question hung in the air. What did I think? I realized I hadn't asked myself that in months. I'd been so focused on being the wife Kelvin wanted, on making him happy, on keeping the peace, that I'd forgotten to think about what I wanted. "I think," I said slowly, "that marriage is about compromise. And if this is what Kelvin needs from me right now, then I need to step up." Monica looked like she wanted to say more, but she just reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Okay, but if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here. Always." "I know. Thank you." But I didn't call Monica when things got worse. I didn't call anyone. By the time our first anniversary rolled around, Kelvin had become someone I barely recognized. The warm, attentive man who'd courted me was gone. In his place was someone cold, critical, and often cruel. He snapped at me over little things. He complained constantly. He compared me to other women, his friends' wives, women he worked with. "Michelle keeps her house spotless, and she has 3 kids. What's your excuse? Sarah just started her own business while running a household. Why can't you be more like that?" And then there was Jasmine. I first heard the name about 14 months into the marriage. Kelvin mentioned her casually over breakfast one Saturday morning. "I need to meet with Jasmine this afternoon. She's helping me close the deal on that property downtown." "Jasmine?" I asked, looking up from my coffee. "New investor. She's got connections I need." That was all he said. But something about the way he said her name, something about the way he wouldn't quite meet my eyes, made alarm bells go off in my head. I tried to ignore it. Tried to tell myself I was being paranoid, insecure, that this was just business. But then, Kelvin started staying out later, started being even more distant, started smelling like perfume that wasn't mine when he came home. I wasn't stupid. I knew what was happening, but I was also trapped. I'd quit my job. I had isolated myself from my friends, spending all my time trying to be the perfect wife. I'd invested everything in this marriage, in this man, and the thought of admitting it was all falling apart was too painful to bear. So, I stayed quiet. I smiled when Kelvin's business partners came over. I cooked and cleaned and played the role of the devoted wife, and I prayed that things would get better. Then I got pregnant. I found out on a random Tuesday afternoon. I'd been feeling sick for a week. Exhausted, emotional. I took 3 pregnancy tests just to be sure, and all 3 came back positive. 2 pink lines that changed everything. I was terrified and thrilled all at once. This wasn't how I'd planned it, not with things between Kelvin and me being so strained. But maybe, I thought, maybe a baby would bring us back together. Maybe this was what we needed. Maybe becoming parents would remind Kelvin of why he'd fallen in love with me in the first place. I planned a special dinner to tell him. I cooked his favorite meal, pot roast with mashed potatoes and green beans. I bought a little baby onesie that said, "Daddy's Little Champion," and wrapped it in tissue paper. I set the dining room table with our good china, lit candles, put on soft music. When Kelvin came home that night, 3 hours later than he'd said he would, I was still waiting. The food had gone cold again, but I quickly reheated it, plastering a smile on my face. "Hey baby," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "I made your favorite. Come sit down. I have something to tell you." Kelvin barely looked at me. "I already ate." "Oh, well, that's okay. Just come sit for a minute. Please, this is important." He sighed like I was asking him to move a mountain, but he followed me to the dining room and sat down. He looked tired, irritated, like he wanted to be anywhere but here. I sat across from him, my heart pounding. I slid the wrapped onesie across the table. Open it. He looked at the package like it might explode, then slowly unwrapped it. When he pulled out the tiny piece of clothing, his face went blank. Completely blank. "I'm pregnant," I said, my voice soft, hopeful. "We're having a baby, Kelvin. We're going to be parents." For a long moment, he said nothing. He just stared at the onesie in his hands. And then finally, he looked up at me, and I saw something in his eyes that made my blood run cold. It wasn't joy. It wasn't excitement. It was resentment. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice flat. I took 3 tests, all positive. I'm about 6 weeks along. He set the onesie down on the table carefully, like it was something dangerous. "Well," he said, standing up, "congratulations. I need to make some calls." And then he walked away. Walked right out of the dining room, leaving me sitting there alone with the cold food and the candles and the tiny piece of clothing that was supposed to change everything. That's when I knew, really knew deep in my bones, that something was terribly wrong, that the man I'd married was gone, if he'd ever really existed at all. But I didn't know how bad it would get. I didn't know that in 4 months I'd be on my knees on the kitchen floor, 6 months pregnant, watching my husband pick up a pot of boiling water with murder in his eyes. I didn't know that the worst night of my life was coming, and I had no idea that what I'd do next would change both of our lives forever. The pregnancy changed everything, but not in the way I had hoped. Kelvin became colder, more distant, like the news of the baby had built a wall between us that got thicker every single day. He stopped coming home for dinner altogether. He stopped sleeping in our bed most nights, saying he didn't want to disturb my rest. He stopped touching me, stopped looking at me, stopped pretending that everything was okay. And Jasmine's name started coming up more and more. I'm meeting Jasmine for lunch to discuss the Riverside project. Jasmine thinks we should invest in that new development on the west side. Jasmine said the funniest thing today. Jasmine, Jasmine, Jasmine. The name became like poison in my ears. 2 months into the pregnancy, my morning sickness was so bad I could barely keep anything down. I'd spend hours hunched over the toilet, my whole body shaking, tears streaming down my face. And Kelvin. Kelvin would step over me on his way out the door, phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something someone was saying. One morning, I was so weak I couldn't get up off the bathroom floor. I called Kelvin's phone 6 times. He didn't answer. I finally texted him, "Please come home. I need help. I can't get up." He texted back 3 hours later, "Call your mother. I'm in a meeting." That's when I realized I was completely alone in this marriage. I was carrying this man's child, living in his house, and I was completely, utterly alone. But I didn't call my mother. I couldn't, because calling my mother meant admitting that she had been right all along. It meant admitting that I'd made a terrible mistake. It meant facing the truth that the life I'd built was nothing but a beautiful lie. So I picked myself up off that bathroom floor. I cleaned myself up. I forced myself to eat. And I told myself that things would get better. They had to get better. Except they got worse. By the time I was 4 months pregnant, Kelvin wasn't even trying to hide what he was doing anymore. He'd come home smelling like perfume and lie right to my face when I asked where he'd been. He'd leave his phone on the counter and step out of the room, and I would see text messages lighting up the screen. Messages from Jasmine. "Last night was amazing. Can't stop thinking about you. When are you going to tell her?" My hands would shake as I read them, my heart breaking into smaller and smaller pieces, but I still didn't say anything, because what could I say? I was pregnant, unemployed, financially dependent on a man who clearly didn't love me anymore. What were my options? Then came the night that changed everything. The night Monica called me, her voice tight with anger and something else, something that sounded like pity. "Tasha," Monica said, "I need to tell you something, and you're not going to want to hear it. But I love you, and I can't keep this to myself anymore." My stomach dropped. I was sitting on the couch in the living room, my hand resting on my growing belly, and I already knew. I already knew what Monica was about to say. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "I saw Kelvin tonight at Morton Steakhouse. He was with a woman." Silence. "Tasha, they weren't just having dinner. He had his arm around her. He was kissing her right there in public. Like he didn't care who saw. Like he wasn't a married man with a pregnant wife at home." I couldn't breathe. The room was spinning and I couldn't breathe. "Her name tag said Jasmine. She works at the restaurant, I think, or she's a regular. I don't know. But Tasha, everyone there knew them. The staff was smiling at them like they were a couple, like they'd been there together before. Okay, I said. Just that one word. Okay, okay? Tasha, did you hear what I just said? Your husband is cheating on you in public while you're pregnant with his child. I heard you. So what are you going to do? That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? Confront him? Leave him? Stay and pretend I didn't know? Every option felt impossible. I don't know, I said finally. I need to think. Tasha, you can't just think about this. You need to do something. You need to leave him. I'm pregnant, Monica. I'm 4 months pregnant. I don't have a job. I don't have any money of my own. Where am I supposed to go? You come stay with me or you go to your mother's. But you cannot stay with a man who treats you like this. You cannot raise a child in this environment. But I did stay, because I was scared, because I didn't know how to leave, because some small, desperate part of me still hoped that maybe if I tried harder, if I was better, if I could just figure out what I was doing wrong, Kelvin would come back to me. That night, when Kelvin came home at 2:00 the morning, I was waiting in the living room. The house was dark except for one lamp in the corner, casting long shadows across the walls. Where were you? I asked when he walked in. He didn't even have the decency to look surprised. Working. At Morton's Steakhouse? Now he looked at me, really looked at me, and there was something in his eyes, something cold and calculating, like he was trying to figure out how much I knew and how much he could get away with lying about. Who told you that? He asked. Does it matter? Were you there or not? I had a business dinner with Jasmine. The name hung in the air between us like a bomb waiting to explode. Kelvin's jaw tightened. He set his keys down on the table by the door, and when he spoke again, his voice was ice cold. What I do for my business is none of your concern. You're my husband. You're the father of my child. Everything you do is my concern. He laughed then. Actually laughed. It was a harsh, cruel sound that made my skin crawl. Your child? Tasha, let's be real here. That baby is the only reason you're still in this house. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to be tied down to you for the next 18 years? The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt like I couldn't breathe, like someone had punched all the air out of my lungs. What are you saying? I whispered. I'm saying that you trapped me. You got pregnant on purpose to lock me down, and now I'm stuck with you. That's not true. We both wanted a baby. You said you wanted to start a family. I lied. He said it so casually, so easily, like he was talking about the weather. I told you what you wanted to hear, and you were so desperate to believe it that you fell for every word. My eyes filled with tears, but I refused to let them fall. I wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Then why did you marry me? If you never loved me, if this was all a lie, why did you marry me? Kelvin smiled, and it was the cruelest smile I had ever seen. Because you were safe. You were respectable. You were the kind of woman I could bring to business dinners and charity events. You made me look good. But love? No, Tasha. I never loved you. I was just playing a role, and you were naive enough to believe it. The room was spinning. I gripped the arm of the couch to steady myself, my other hand protectively covering my belly. This couldn't be real. This couldn't be happening. And Jasmine? I asked, my voice breaking. Jasmine is everything you're not. She's exciting. She's passionate. She understands me. She doesn't nag me or need me, or make me feel like I'm suffocating every time I walk through the door. I'm your wife. You're a mistake I'm paying for. The words shattered something inside me, something fundamental and important, something that could never be put back together. I stood up, my legs shaking, my whole body trembling with rage and grief and despair. Get out, I said. Excuse me? I said, get out. This is my home, too. Get out. Kelvin's face twisted with anger. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, getting right in. My face. I could smell alcohol on his breath mixed with that perfume, Jasmine's perfume. This is my house, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Everything in this house is mine. The furniture, the car in the garage, the clothes on your back. You own nothing. You are nothing. And if you think for 1 second that you can tell me what to do in my own home, you're even dumber than I thought. He pushed past me then, his shoulders slamming into mine to make me stumble. I heard him go upstairs, heard a door slam, and then there was silence. Horrible, suffocating silence. I sank back down onto the couch, And this time, I let the tears come. I cried for the life I thought I'd have. I cried for the man I thought I'd married. I cried for my baby, who was going to be born into this nightmare. And I cried for myself, for the woman I used to be, the strong, independent woman who would never have let anyone treat her this way. What had I become? After that night, things somehow got even worse. Kelvin stopped pretending altogether. He'd bring Jasmine's name up constantly, throwing it in my face like a weapon. Jasmine thinks you should lose some weight before the baby comes. She says pregnancy isn't an excuse to let yourself go. Jasmine made the best dinner last night, actually knew how to season food properly. Jasmine thinks I should make you sign a post-nuptial agreement. Says I'm too generous, letting you live here for free. Every comment was designed to hurt, to humiliate, to make me feel smaller and smaller until I disappeared completely. And it was working. I stopped looking at myself in mirrors. I stopped calling my friends. I stopped leaving the house unless I absolutely had to. I became a ghost in my own life, just going through the motions, waiting for something to change. Then at 5 months pregnant, I met Jasmine face to face. I'd gone to the grocery store, something I rarely did anymore because I hated going out in public, hated the way people looked at me like they could see how pathetic I was. I was in the produce section trying to decide between 2 bunches of grapes when I heard a voice behind me. "You must be Tasha." I turned around, and there she was, Jasmine. She was everything Kelvin had implied she'd be: tall, beautiful, perfectly put together in designer clothes and expensive jewelry. Her hair was styled in long, elegant waves. Her makeup was flawless, and she was looking at me with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm sorry. Do I know you?" I asked, even though I already knew. I already knew exactly who this woman was. "I'm Jasmine. I work with Kelvin." She said it so casually, so easily, like we were just 2 women meeting at the grocery store, not a wife and her husband's mistress. My hand instinctively went to my belly, protective, defensive. "I know who you are." Jasmine's smile widened. "Good. Then we can skip the awkward introductions. I just wanted to see you for myself. Kelvin talks about you all the time." "I'm sure he does. He says you're struggling with the pregnancy, with taking care of the house, with everything. He says you're overwhelmed." Every word was a knife, carefully aimed and perfectly placed. I could feel my face burning with humiliation, but I forced myself to stand tall, to not let this woman see how much this was destroying me. "Is there something you want?" I asked, my voice cold. "I just think it's important that we understand each other." Jasmine stepped closer, and I could smell her perfume. The same perfume I'd been smelling on Kelvin for months. "Kelvin and I, we have something real, something you could never give him. And honestly, I think deep down, you know that. You know he doesn't love you. You know this marriage is over. He's my husband. He's my future." Jasmine's voice was soft, almost gentle, which made her words even more cruel. "And that baby you're carrying, that's the only thing keeping you relevant. But babies grow up, Tasha. And when yours does, when Kelvin doesn't need you to play mommy anymore, where does that leave you? A sad, desperate woman clinging to a man who can't stand to look at her." My vision blurred with tears, but I refused to let them fall. "Not here, not in front of this woman. Stay away from my husband." Jasmine laughed, a light tinkling sound that made me want to scream. "Oh, honey, he's not yours. He hasn't been yours for a long time. You're just too pathetic to see it." And then she walked away, her heels clicking against the floor, leaving me standing there in the produce section, shaking, humiliated, broken. That night, I tried to tell Kelvin what happened. Tried to tell him that his mistress had confronted me, had threatened me, had said terrible things. But Kelvin just shrugged. "Maybe if you weren't so insecure, you wouldn't see everything as a threat," he said, not even looking up from his phone. "Jasmine was probably just trying to be friendly, and you took it the wrong way like you always do." She called me pathetic, Kelvin. She said I was desperate and sad. Well, are you? The question hung in the air. I stared at my husband, this man I'd promised to love, for better or worse, and I realized I didn't even recognize him anymore. Or maybe I'd never known him at all. Maybe this was who he'd always been, and I'd just been too blind to see it. "I want a divorce," I said quietly. Kelvin finally looked up from his phone. His eyes were cold, amused. "No, you don't." "Yes, I do. I can't do this anymore. I can't live like this." "And where are you going to go? Back to your mother's? Back to that tiny apartment she has in Bronzeville? You going to raise a baby in one bedroom with no money, no job, no prospects? He stood up, walking toward me slowly, like a predator circling prey. You're going to stay right here, Tasha, because you have no other choice. You're stuck with me just like I'm stuck with you, so you might as well get used to it. I'll get a lawyer. I'll take half of everything. He laughed again. Try it. See what happens. I have the best lawyers in Chicago on retainer. They'll bury you, and when it's all over, you'll walk away with nothing, and I'll have full custody of that baby. Is that what you want? I felt the fight drain out of me, because he was right. I had no money, no job, no way to fight him. He'd thought of everything. He'd trapped me completely. I was his prisoner, and we both knew it. The next 2 weeks were the darkest of my life. I barely ate. I barely slept. I moved through the house like a zombie, just existing, just surviving. Kelvin barely acknowledged my presence. He'd come and go as he pleased, sometimes not coming home for days at a time. And when he was home, he treated me like I was invisible. Until the night it all came crashing down. The night was silent when Kelvin returned, smelling of Jasmine's perfume and alcohol. I heard the front door slam, heard his heavy footsteps moving through the house. I was in the kitchen, staring blankly at the pot of water on the stove, watching the bubbles rise and pop on the surface. I'd been making myself tea, though I couldn't remember why now. Nothing seemed to matter anymore. Kelvin strode into the kitchen, his presence heavy with arrogance, and something darker, something dangerous. His eyes were bloodshot, his tie was loose, and that perfume, Jasmine's perfume, clung to him like a second skin. His eyes locked onto me, and I saw something in them that made my blood run cold. Rage. Pure, unfiltered rage. Still up? He sneered, leaning against the counter. Still pretending you're special? Still pretending you matter? I didn't respond. I'd learned that silence was safer than words. But tonight, something inside me snapped. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was the tiny flicker of the woman I used to be, fighting to survive. I want a divorce, Kelvin, I said quietly, my hand resting protectively on my belly. I can't do this anymore. Kelvin's lips curled into a bitter smile. You think you can walk away from me? You think you have that power? Yes, I whispered, my voice shaking but defiant. Yes, I do. The smile vanished from Kelvin's face, replaced by something cold and terrifying. He straightened up, his eyes never leaving mine, and slowly, deliberately, he walked toward the stove. Let's see if you still think that, he said, his voice eerily calm now. Before I could process what was happening, Kelvin grabbed the pot of boiling water. Steam rose from the surface, and my heart stopped. Kelvin, no. Without warning, without hesitation, he poured the boiling water across my chest and arms. The scream that tore from my throat was primal, animalistic. The pain was beyond anything I'd ever experienced. White, hot, searing, unbearable. I fell to my knees, clutching at my burned skin, my body convulsing with agony. The smell of burned flesh filled the air, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I registered that it was my own skin I was smelling. But what hurt more than the physical pain? What shattered me more completely than the burns was the realization washing over me like a second wave of boiling water. The man I loved had become a monster. Kelvin stood over me, looking down at my writhing form with cold satisfaction. No remorse, no horror at what he'd just done, just satisfaction. Pathetic, he mocked, his voice dripping with contempt. Look at you on the floor where you belong. No one will want you now, Tasha. Not like this, not scarred and broken and desperate. I couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The pain was too intense, the shock too overwhelming. I just knelt there on the cold kitchen floor, 6 months pregnant, burned and broken, staring up at the man I'd promised to love forever. And in that moment, something inside me died. The love I'd clung to so desperately, the hope that had kept me trapped in this nightmare, the belief that maybe somehow things could get better, all of it vanished like smoke. But something else was born in its place, something harder, something fiercer, something that wouldn't be broken or burned or beaten down. Kelvin turned and walked away, leaving me there on the floor. I heard him go upstairs, heard a door slam, and then there was silence. I didn't know how long I stayed there. Minutes, hours, time had lost all meaning. Eventually, when I could finally move, I dragged myself to the bathroom. Every movement was agony, my burned skin screaming with each breath. I stood in front of the mirror, forcing myself to look at my reflection. The woman staring back at me was a stranger. My arms and chest were covered in angry red burns, already starting to blister. My face was swollen and tear-stained. My eyes were hollow, haunted. This wasn't the confident, ambitious woman who'd walked into that wedding reception 3 years ago. This wasn't even the hopeful, loving wife who'd tried so hard to make her marriage work. This was a woman who'd been pushed to the absolute breaking point. But as I stared at my reflection, as I really looked at myself for the first time in months, I saw something else. Something Kelvin hadn't been able to burn away. Strength. I was still standing, still breathing, still alive. And I was carrying a child who deserved better than this, who deserved a mother who knew how to fight back. I cleaned my burns as best I could, biting down on a towel to keep from screaming. The pain was excruciating, but I welcomed it now. It was proof that I was still here, still capable of feeling, still capable of surviving. As I wrapped gauze around my arms, I made a decision, a vow, a promise to myself and to the child growing inside me. I would not let Kelvin or Jasmine break me any longer. I would fight back. And when I was done, Kelvin Richards would regret the day he ever thought I was weak. The next morning, I woke up before dawn, my whole body aching, but my mind crystal clear for the first time in months. Kelvin was still asleep upstairs, probably passed out from the alcohol. I had time. I went to my laptop, the one Kelvin had bought me as an anniversary gift, and then promptly forgotten about. My fingers flew across the keyboard as I opened a new document. I started writing everything, every insult, every threat, every moment of abuse, every time he'd mentioned Jasmine, every lie he'd told, every dollar he'd spent on his mistress that should have been family money. I documented it all with dates and times and as much detail as I could remember. When Kelvin came down 3 hours later, I was in the kitchen, that same submissive mask back on my face, making him breakfast like nothing had happened. He looked at my bandaged arms and smirked. "Learned your lesson?" "Yes," I said softly, keeping my eyes down. "I'm sorry. You're right. I need to be grateful for everything you've given me." Kelvin seemed satisfied with that. He ate his breakfast, checked his phone, and left for work without another word. The moment his car pulled out of the driveway, I got to work. I went through every drawer, every file cabinet, every box in Kelvin's home office. I photographed bank statements, credit card bills, business contracts. I found receipts for jewelry he'd bought Jasmine $15,000 worth. I found texts he'd printed out and forgotten about, explicit messages between him and his mistress, planning their future together while he was still married. I found everything I needed. Then I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I called Monica. "Tasha?" Monica answered on the first ring, her voice worried. "Oh my God, I've been trying to reach you for weeks. Are you okay?" "No," I said, and my voice was surprisingly steady. "I'm not okay, but I'm going to be. Monica, I need your help. I need you to help me find a lawyer, a good one, someone who specializes in divorce and domestic abuse cases." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then Monica said, "What happened?" "Everything. But I can't talk about it over the phone. Can you come over today while Kelvin's at work?" "I'm on my way right now." Monica arrived 30 minutes later, and when she saw my burns, when she saw the evidence I'd collected, when she heard what Kelvin had done, she actually started crying. "We're getting you out of here," Monica said fiercely. "Today, right now, you're coming to stay with me." "No," I said calmly. "Not yet. If I leave now, I'll have nothing. No money, no security, no leverage. Kelvin will take everything, including my baby. I need to be smart about this. I need to plan." "Tasha, he poured boiling water on you. He could have killed you. He could have killed the baby." "I know. And that's exactly why I need to do this right. I need to destroy him, Monica. Completely, so he can never hurt me or my child again." Monica stared at me, seeing something new in my eyes, something hard and determined and absolutely unbreakable. "Okay," Monica said finally. "Okay, I know a lawyer, Sarah Chin. She's the best divorce attorney in Chicago, and she doesn't lose. But Tasha, she's expensive. How are you going to pay for her?" I held up a diamond bracelet, one of the many expensive pieces of jewelry Kelvin had bought me over the years to assuage his guilt. "I'm going to start selling these. All of them. Everything he ever gave me. I'll get enough for a retainer, and we'll figure out the rest. Over the next 2 weeks, I became a different person. On the surface, I was still the submissive, broken wife Kelvin expected. I cooked his meals, cleaned his house, smiled when he came home. I didn't complain when he stayed out late with Jasmine. I didn't argue when he criticized me. I just nodded and agreed and played my role perfectly. But underneath, I was planning, calculating, preparing for war. I met with Sarah Chin in secret, in a coffee shop across town, where I knew Kelvin would never go. Sarah was a sharp, no-nonsense woman in her 40s with a reputation for destroying cheating husbands in court. "Show me what you have," Sarah said, and I laid out everything. The documented abuse, the financial records, the proof of Kelvin's affair, the photographs of my burns. Sarah's expression grew darker and darker as she reviewed the evidence. Finally, she looked up at me and said, "This is good. This is really good. With this, we can not only get you a divorce, we can make sure you walk away with everything. The house, the business assets, full custody, alimony, everything." "I don't want alimony," I said quietly. "I want the business. I want to take what he built and turn it into something better. Something that actually helps people instead of just feeding his ego." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "You understand that's going to be a fight? He's not going to hand over his company without a war." "Good," I said, and there was steel in my voice. "Let him fight. Let him see what happens when he underestimates me." I sold my jewelry piece by piece, using different pawn shops and online buyers so Kelvin wouldn't notice. I raised $8,000 for Sarah's retainer and started building a war chest. I opened a secret bank account in my name only. I started researching Kelvin's business, understanding the deals he was working on, the partnerships he'd formed, the vulnerable points in his empire. And all the while, I smiled and played the devoted wife. Kelvin, arrogant and oblivious, never suspected a thing. He was too busy with Jasmine, too confident in his control over me to see what was happening right under his nose. One night, about 3 weeks after the boiling water incident, I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when Kelvin came home early. He was actually in a good mood, which was rare these days. "Jasmine and I are going to Miami this weekend," he announced, grabbing a beer from the refrigerator. "Business trip, don't wait up." "Of course," I said sweetly, stirring the pasta sauce. "Whatever you need." He looked at me suspiciously, like he was waiting for me to protest, to cry, to beg him not to go. When I didn't, he seemed almost disappointed. "You're being very agreeable lately," he said. "Why?" I turned to face him, keeping my expression neutral, almost apologetic. "You were right, Kelvin, about everything. I was needy and desperate, and I was making your life miserable. I'm trying to be better, to be the wife you deserve." He studied me for a long moment, then nodded, satisfied. "Good. It's about time you figured that out. Maybe there's hope for you after all." He left the room, and I went back to stirring the sauce, a small, cold smile playing at my lips. Let him think he'd won. Let him think I was beaten. He had no idea what was coming. But the pressure kept building. Kelvin became increasingly dismissive and cruel, his confidence growing with each day that I didn't fight back. He started treating me like a servant, ordering me around, criticizing everything I did. "The house is a mess," he'd say, even when it was spotless. "Dinner is terrible," he'd complain, pushing his plate away even though he'd eaten most of it. "You look awful. No wonder I prefer spending time with Jasmine." Every comment was designed to break me down, to remind me of my place, and I took it all with a smile and a nod, filing it away, adding it to my growing list of evidence. Then one afternoon, Jasmine showed up at the house. I was 7 months pregnant now, my belly round and heavy, moving slower than usual. I answered the door, and there was Kelvin's mistress standing on my porch like she owned the place, wearing a designer dress and a cruel smile. "Hello, Tasha," Jasmine said. "Mind if I come in?" Kelvin told me to stop by and pick up some documents he left in his office. I knew it was a lie. Knew Jasmine was here to gloat, to rub her victory in my face. But I stepped aside and let the woman in, still playing my role. Jasmine walked through the house like she was inspecting it, touching things, commenting on the decor. "It's nice," she said, though her tone implied the opposite. "A bit dated, but nice. Kelvin and I are looking at condos downtown. Something more modern, more sophisticated." "That sounds lovely," I said, my voice flat. Jasmine turned to face me and her smile turned vicious. You know what's funny? You're standing here in this house, pregnant with his child, playing housewife, and you think that gives you power? You think that makes you important? She stepped closer, invading my space. But let me tell you something. You're nothing but an obligation to him, a burden. He's counting down the days until he can get rid of you. And that baby? That's just 18 years of child support payments. It doesn't make you special. It makes you a sad, desperate woman, clinging to a man who can't stand the sight of you. I looked at Jasmine, really looked at her, and I saw it. The insecurity, the desperation. Because Kelvin hadn't left me yet, had he? Despite all his promises to Jasmine, despite all his cruelty toward his wife, he was still here, still living in this house, still legally married, and Jasmine knew it. She knew she hadn't really won. Is there anything else you need? I asked calmly. Or was insulting me the only reason you came? Jasmine's face flushed with anger. You think you're so strong, don't you? So noble and long-suffering. But your time is up, Tasha. Kelvin is mine. He's always been mine. You were just a placeholder, a pretty face to bring to business dinners while he figured out what he really wanted. And now that he knows, now that he has me, you're obsolete. Then why are you here? I asked. And for the first time, I let a little bit of steel show in my voice. If you've already won, if I'm so pathetic and irrelevant, why do you feel the need to come to my home and tell me that? Why do you care what I think or feel? Jasmine's mouth opened, then closed. She had no answer. I think you should leave, I said, walking to the door and opening it. Tell Kelvin I'll have those documents ready for him when he gets home. Jasmine left, but not before throwing one last venomous look over her shoulder. You'll regret this. Both of you will regret underestimating me, I said. I closed the door and leaned against it, my heart pounding. But I wasn't afraid. I was exhilarated because Jasmine had just shown her hand. She was scared, insecure, and that made her dangerous, yes, but it also made her vulnerable. That night, I called Sarah Chin. I'm ready, I said. Let's do this. Let's take him down. Are you sure? Sarah asked. Once we file, there's no going back. Kelvin will know you're fighting, and he'll fight dirty. I'm counting on it, I said. I want him to fight. I want him to show everyone exactly who he really is, and then I want to watch his whole world crumble. Sarah was quiet for a moment, then said, Okay, I'll start preparing the papers. But Tasha, I need you to do something for me first. I need you to plan something big, something public, something that will make sure everyone sees what Kelvin has done and who he really is. Can you do that? A slow smile spread across my face. Actually, I said, I have the perfect idea. 3 weeks later, I put my plan into motion. Kelvin had been talking about hosting a dinner party for months, something big, something impressive to show off to his business partners and investors. He wanted to prove that despite the rumors circulating about his personal life, he was still the same successful, put-together businessman they'd always known. I encouraged it, pushed for it even. I told him it was a brilliant idea, that it would show everyone how strong we were as a couple, how the gossip about him and Jasmine was just that gossip. Kelvin, flattered and oblivious, agreed immediately. Make it perfect, he told me. I'm inviting everyone who matters, the Hendersons, the Johnsons, Marcus and his wife, even my business partner Stephen and his family. This needs to be the party of the year. It will be, I promised, and I meant it, just not in the way Kelvin expected. Over the next 3 weeks, I transformed. I hired a caterer using money from my secret account. I sent out elegant invitations. I decorated the house until it looked like something from a magazine. I played the role of the perfect hostess, planning every detail with meticulous care. But I was planning something else too. Something Kelvin would never see coming. Sarah Chin had been working behind the scenes, filing divorce papers, preparing legal documents, gathering additional evidence. But she'd agreed to wait until after the dinner party to serve Kelvin. Because what I had planned was so much better than a quiet legal filing. I was going to destroy him in front of everyone he cared about. The night of the party arrived. The house was filled with flowers, candles, and soft music. I had hired servers in crisp white shirts to circulate with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. I'd even hired a string quartet to play in the corner of the living room. And I looked stunning. I'd bought a dress, a deep emerald green that complemented my skin tone perfectly, and somehow made my 7.5-month pregnant belly look elegant instead of awkward. I'd done my hair and makeup, covered the scars on my arms with carefully applied concealer and long sleeves. And when I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. I looked powerful, confident, like a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. Kelvin noticed. When he came downstairs and saw me, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe even a hint of the attraction he'd once felt for me. "You look good," he said, almost grudgingly. "Thank you," I replied, my voice smooth as silk. "I want tonight to be perfect for you, for us." The guests started arriving at 7. Marcus and his wife Diane came first, old friends of Kelvin's from college. Then came the Hendersons, a wealthy couple who'd invested in several of Kelvin's properties. Stephen Chin, Kelvin's business partner, arrived with his wife and teenage daughter. And then at 7:30, Jasmine walked through the door. I had sent her an invitation too, had Monica hand-deliver it with a note that said, "Kelvin asked me to make sure you were here. He said it was important." It was a lie, of course. Kelvin had no idea Jasmine was coming, but Jasmine, confident in her place in Kelvin's life, had shown up anyway, wearing a dress that was far too revealing for a dinner party and heels that clicked loudly against the marble floor. The moment Kelvin saw her, his face went pale. He pulled me aside, his grip tight on my arm. "What is she doing here?" he hissed. I blinked innocently. "Jasmine? She's your business partner, isn't she? I thought you'd want her here. You talk about her so much. I assumed she was important to you." Kelvin's jaw clenched. He knew he couldn't make a scene, couldn't throw Jasmine out without raising questions, so he plastered on a smile and went to greet her, trying to act like her presence was perfectly normal. I watched them, watched Jasmine touch Kelvin's arm possessively, watched him try to maintain distance while also not wanting to offend her. It was already starting to unravel, and the real show hadn't even begun. Dinner was served at 8. I had arranged the seating carefully, Kelvin at the head of the table, myself at the opposite end, Jasmine seated right next to Kelvin, close enough that everyone would notice, close enough that the whispers would start, and they did. I could see the other wives exchanging glances, could see Marcus raise an eyebrow when Jasmine laughed too loudly at something Kelvin said, could see Stephen's wife lean over and whisper something to her daughter. The first course was served, a beautiful butternut squash soup. Conversation flowed, polite and pleasant on the surface, but I could feel the tension building, could see Kelvin getting more and more uncomfortable as Jasmine became more and more bold, touching his hand, leaning into him, acting like they were together. When the main course came, perfectly cooked filet mignon with roasted vegetables, I stood up. I tapped my glass with a spoon, and the room fell silent. "I want to thank you all for coming tonight," I said, my voice clear and strong. "It means so much to Kelvin and me to have our closest friends and business partners here to share this evening with us." Kelvin relaxed slightly, thinking this was just a normal dinner party toast. But I wasn't done. "Marriage is interesting, isn't it?" I continued, walking slowly around the table. "When you first get married, you think you know the person you're committing to. You think you understand who they are, what they value, what they're capable of." I paused behind Kelvin's chair, my hand resting lightly on his shoulder. I felt him stiffen. But then, time passes, and you start to see the truth. The mask comes off, and you realize that the person you married is someone completely different than who you thought they were. "Tasha," Kelvin said, his voice tight. "Maybe we should." "Did you know," I interrupted, moving away from him and continuing around the table, "that Kelvin has been having an affair for the past year and a half?" The room went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Every eye was on me now, wide with shock. Kelvin shot to his feet. "Tasha, stop this right now." "With Jasmine," I continued, looking directly at the woman in question. Jasmine's face had gone white. In fact, they're sitting right next to each other. How convenient. "This is inappropriate," Kelvin said, his voice shaking with rage. "You need to stop talking now." "Why?" I asked, and my voice was calm, almost curious. "Because I'm embarrassing you? Because I'm telling the truth in front of people who matter? Isn't that what you've been doing to me for months? Humiliating me, belittling me, making me feel like I was nothing?" I reached into the small purse I'd been carrying and pulled out a folder. I opened it and began pulling out papers, laying them on the table for everyone to see. Credit card statements showing that Kelvin spent over $70,000 on jewelry, clothes, and trips for his mistress. Bank records showing he withdrew money from our joint account, money that was supposed to be for our family to pay for her apartment. Text messages between them, planning their future together while I was pregnant with his child. I placed each piece of evidence on the table like I was dealing cards. The guests were frozen, some leaning forward to look at the documents, others sitting back in horror. "Tasha, I'm warning you," Kelvin started. "And this," I said, and now my voice shook slightly, "is a photograph of the burns I received 3 weeks ago when my husband poured boiling water on me." I pulled up my sleeves, revealing the still healing burns on my arms. Several people gasped. Diane actually stood up, her hand over her mouth. The room erupted. Everyone started talking at once. Stephen was on his feet, staring at Kelvin in horror. Marcus was shaking his head, backing away from the table. The wives were whispering frantically to each other. "This is insane," Kelvin said, trying to regain control. "She's making this up. She's been unstable lately. The pregnancy hormones." "I have medical records," I said calmly. I pulled out another document. From the emergency room, I visited the next day. The doctor documented second-degree burns on my arms, chest, and shoulders, consistent with scalding water. He also documented that I was 6 months pregnant at the time, and that I told him my husband had done this to me. Kelvin's face was turning red, his hands clenched into fists. "You went to the hospital?" "You told them." I told them the truth. My voice was steel now, something you seem incapable of doing. Jasmine suddenly stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. "This is ridiculous, Kelvin. Tell them. Tell them she's lying." "Oh, Jasmine," I said, turning to face her. "I didn't forget about you. Did you know that Kelvin has been telling you he's going to leave me for over a year? That he's been stringing you along, making promises he never intended to keep?" Jasmine's confident expression faltered. "That's not true. Kelvin loves me. We're going to be together." "Really?" I pulled out my phone and started reading. These are text messages from Kelvin to his business partners. "Jasmine is getting clingy. I need to figure out how to end this without causing drama." "That's from 2 weeks ago." Jasmine looked at Kelvin, her eyes wide. "Kelvin, she's taking things out of context," Kelvin said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Here's another one," I continued. "Jasmine thinks I'm leaving Tasha after the baby is born. I'm not that stupid. The divorce would cost me millions. Better to just keep things as they are." "You said you loved me," Jasmine shrieked, her voice breaking. "You said I was the one." "He's been playing both of us," I said, almost gently, making us both believe we were special while he protected himself and his money. "The only person Kelvin has ever loved is Kelvin." The room was in chaos now. Stephen was grabbing his wife and daughter, heading for the door. Marcus was confronting Kelvin, demanding to know if any of this was true. Diane was crying, holding onto my hand. And then, at the height of the chaos, there was a knock at the door. I walked calmly through the confusion and opened it. Sarah Chin stood there, flanked by 2 police officers and a process server. "Mrs. Richards?" the process server said. "Yes. These are for your husband. He's being served." He handed me a thick envelope. "Divorce papers." I took the envelope and walked back into the dining room. The police officers followed me, and everyone fell silent again. "Kelvin Richards?" one of the officers said. Kelvin's face was ashen. "What?" "We have a protective order here. You're being ordered to vacate this property immediately. Mrs. Richards has filed for divorce and has documented evidence of domestic abuse. You have 30 minutes to pack essential belongings and leave." "This is my house," Kelvin roared. "You can't kick me out of my own house." "Actually," Sarah Chin said, stepping forward, "the house is in both your names, as is everything purchased during the marriage. And given the documented abuse and the fact that Mrs. Richards is pregnant, the court has granted her exclusive use of the marital home pending the divorce proceedings." She pulled out more papers. "We're also filing for full custody of the unborn child, emergency spousal support, and we're freezing all joint accounts to prevent you from hiding assets." Kelvin's eyes went wild. He looked around the room at all his friends, his business partners, his mistress, and his wife. And for the first time, I saw something in his face that I'd never seen before. Fear. He was finally realizing that he'd lost. That the woman he'd underestimated, the woman he'd abused and humiliated and tried to break, had just destroyed him publicly, completely, irreversibly. "You can't do this," he whispered, looking at me. "You're nothing without me. You have nothing." "Wrong," I said, and I smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a woman who'd been to hell and climbed back out stronger. I have everything. My dignity, my strength, my child, my future. And now I have your business too. I pulled out one final document. Did you know that your business partner, Stephen, has been unhappy with your management for months? He's been looking for a reason to buy you out. Well, after seeing all this evidence of your financial mismanagement, your infidelity, your abuse, he's offered to buy out your share of the company for pennies on the dollar. And I've accepted on your behalf, using the power of attorney you gave me when we got married. Kelvin's face went from red to purple. You can't. That's fraud. It's perfectly legal, Sarah interjected. The power of attorney is valid, and given your documented abuse and financial irresponsibility, the court will absolutely uphold this transaction. Stephen stepped forward then, and his face was hard. I've been working with you for 10 years, Kelvin. 10 years. And I had no idea you were this kind of man. No idea you were capable of this. You're out. Effective immediately. Security will pack up your office tomorrow. Kelvin looked around the room desperately, looking for an ally, someone who would stand with him. But everyone was either staring at him in disgust or deliberately looking away. Even Jasmine, she was backing toward the door, tears streaming down her face, realizing that she'd been played too, that Kelvin had never loved her, that she'd destroyed her reputation and her dignity for nothing. You're all going to pay for this, Kelvin said, his voice shaking. All of you. I'll fight this. I'll fight until there's nothing left. Go ahead, I said calmly. Fight. Use up all your money on legal fees. Destroy yourself trying to destroy me. Because I'm not afraid of you anymore, Kelvin. I'm not afraid of anything anymore. The police officers moved forward. Sir, we need you to come with us. You can pack a bag, and then you need to leave the premises. Kelvin was escorted upstairs, one officer on each side of him. The dinner guests started leaving quickly, some stopping to hug me, others just fleeing the dramatic scene. Within 20 minutes, the house was empty except for me, Sarah, Monica, who'd been there the whole time, standing in the back of the room, and the police officers. Kelvin came back down with a single suitcase. His face was blank now, shuttered. As he walked past me toward the door, he stopped. I hope you're happy, he said bitterly. I'm not happy, I replied honestly. I'm heartbroken. I'm traumatized. I'm scared about what comes next. But I'm free, and that's worth more than anything you could have given me. Kelvin left without another word. The door closed behind him, and I heard his car start, heard him drive away into the night, and then I collapsed. My legs simply gave out, and Monica and Sarah caught me, lowering me gently to the floor. The adrenaline that had been holding me up drained away all at once, leaving me shaking and crying and unable to stand. You did it, Monica whispered, holding me tight. Oh my God, Tasha, you really did it. Is it over? I asked, my voice small. Is it really over? The hard part is, Sarah said, there will be legal proceedings, negotiations. But Tasha, you won. You got everything. The house, the business assets, your freedom, your child. You won. I cried for a long time that night. I cried for the woman I'd been, for the love I'd lost, for the life that had turned out to be a lie. I cried for my baby who would grow up without a father in the picture. I cried for everything I'd endured and everything I'd had to become to survive. But when I was finally done crying, when the tears had dried and the sun was starting to rise through the windows, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. The next few months were a whirlwind. The divorce proceedings moved quickly once the evidence was laid out. Kelvin tried to fight, hired expensive lawyers, made threats, but every time he pushed, Sarah pushed back harder. Every time he tried to hide assets, we found them. Every time he lied, we had documentation proving otherwise. The court case became notorious in Chicago social circles. Everyone was talking about it. The successful businessman brought down by his pregnant wife. Some people were on Kelvin's side, claiming I had overreacted, had been vindictive. But most people, especially after seeing the medical reports and the photographs of my burns, sided with me. Kelvin's reputation was destroyed. His business partners dropped him. His investors pulled out. His social circle abandoned him. Even Jasmine, after realizing how badly she'd been used, gave a statement to my lawyers detailing everything Kelvin had promised her, everything he'd lied about. 3 months after that explosive dinner party, the divorce was finalized. I got the house, half of all assets, full custody, child support, and a settlement that totaled just over $2 million. And 2 weeks after that, I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. I named her Hope. Holding my daughter for the first time, looking down at that tiny, perfect face, I made a promise. My daughter would never see her mother accept abuse, would never see her stay in a situation where she was treated as less than. She would grow up knowing that women are strong, that they can survive anything, that they can fight back and win. 6 months after Hope was born, I started my own business. I'd always loved marketing, had been good at it before Kelvin convinced me to quit my job. Now I started a consulting firm specifically designed to help women entrepreneurs build their businesses. I hired Monica as my partner. I used some of my settlement money to fund it, and within a year, we were profitable. Within 2 years, we'd expanded to 3 cities, and 2 years after that, I was invited to speak at a women's empowerment conference in downtown Chicago. I stood backstage, my hands shaking slightly, Hope with a babysitter back home. I'd worked on this speech for weeks, but now that the moment was here, I felt terrified. Then Monica squeezed my hand. "You've survived worse than a speech," she said with a smile. "Go out there and tell them your story." I walked onto that stage, and the applause was overwhelming. The room was packed, hundreds of women, all there to hear stories of survival, of triumph, of transformation. "My name is Tasha Williams," I began, my voice steady despite my nerves. "And 2 years ago, I was in the worst situation of my life. I was trapped in an abusive marriage with a man who made me believe I was worthless. I was pregnant, isolated, financially dependent, and I genuinely believed I had no way out." I paused, looking out at all those faces. And then one night, my husband poured boiling water on me, and in that moment of absolute horror, something inside me changed. I realized that I had 2 choices. I could accept this as my life, as my fate, or I could fight back. The room was completely silent now, everyone hanging on my every word. "I want to tell you all something important, something I wish someone had told me when I was at my lowest point. You are never powerless, even when it feels like you have nothing. Even when you're scared and broken and don't know how you're going to survive the next day. You have power. It's inside you. It's always been inside you." I went on to tell my story. Not all of it. Some things were still too private, too painful. But I told them enough for them to understand the journey, enough for them to see that survival was possible, that triumph was possible. "Revenge," I said near the end of my speech, "isn't about destruction. It isn't about becoming as cruel as the people who hurt you. Real revenge, the kind that matters, is about taking back your life. It's about building something better from the ashes. It's about looking at the person who tried to break you and showing them that they failed." I smiled then, a real smile full of genuine joy. I have a beautiful daughter now. I have a successful business that helps other women achieve their dreams. I have friends who love me and support me. I have peace. I have happiness. And most importantly, I have myself back, the strong, confident woman I used to be. She's here again. She survived, and so can you. The applause when I finished was deafening. Women were on their feet, some crying, some cheering, and I stood there, soaking it in, feeling that power I'd been talking about radiating through my entire body. I'd done it. I'd survived. I'd won. Meanwhile, across town, Kelvin Richards sat in a small apartment, nothing like the mansion he used to own. He'd been watching the news, and there was a segment about a women's empowerment conference. They showed clips of speeches, including mine. He watched his ex-wife on that screen, watched her talk about survival and strength and building a better life. He saw how beautiful she looked, how confident, how successful. He saw everything he'd lost. His business was gone. His reputation was destroyed. His friends had abandoned him. Even Jasmine had left him, had moved to another state to escape the scandal. He was alone, broke, and miserable. And watching me on that screen, watching me thrive while he suffered, Kelvin finally understood something. I'd been right all along. He'd underestimated me. He thought he could control me, break me, shape me into whatever he wanted me to be. He thought his money and his power made him untouchable, but I had proven him wrong. I'd taken everything from him, not through cruelty, but through strength, through truth, through refusing to accept the role he'd assigned to me. He'd lost everything, and I'd gained everything. A single tear rolled down Kelvin's cheek as he turned off the television. But it was too late for tears, too late for regret, too late for anything but living with the consequences of his actions. I stepped out of that conference center into the Chicago sunshine. My phone rang, and it was the babysitter saying Hope was awake and asking for her mommy. "I'm on my way," I said, smiling as I hung up. I got into my car, a practical sedan I'd bought myself, not some status symbol. I drove through the city I'd reclaimed as my own, past the house I used to share with Kelvin. I'd sold it, didn't want the memories, toward the smaller but happier home I'd made for myself and Hope. And as I drove, I thought about everything that had happened, all the pain, all the struggle, all the moments I wanted to give up but didn't. And I thought about what comes next, the business I'll continue to build, the women I'll help, the daughter I'll raise to be strong and independent and unbreakable, the life I'm creating on my own terms. I was broken. I was burned. I was pushed to the absolute edge of what a human being can endure. But I survived. More than that, I triumphed. And as I pulled into my driveway and saw my babysitter holding Hope in the doorway, that beautiful baby girl waving her tiny hands and smiling, I realized something profound. This is revenge. Not the angry, destructive kind, but the sweet, powerful kind that comes from taking back your life and making it better than it ever was before. I got out of the car, took my daughter in my arms, and walked into my home, my sanctuary, my future. And the door closed behind me, shutting out the past and all its pain, opening up a future full of possibility and hope, and the kind of happiness that can only come from knowing you've survived the worst and come out stronger. I won. Not because I destroyed Kelvin, though I did, but because I saved myself. And in doing so, I became the woman I was always meant to be, strong, resilient, unbreakable, and free. I hope you enjoyed watching this story as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below.